Okay, good day, everybody. Welcome back to the scientific communication class, where today we're going to discuss about how we deliver our speech or how we deliver our presentation, uh, which is coming from which is derived or comes from literature review that we teachers got from several books. So what you're going to see today is basically things that are uh, are summarized from several references mentioning about how to we deliver presentation. Okay, as you all probably knew at this point that most of the lecture slides given here is pretty much theoretical in a sense, but the thing that we or that I upload in the EduNext website, in the EduNext, which tells you about several relevant video on how to speak, etc., and so on, and how you arrange or how you organize your slide, etc., and so on, should be beneficial for you in terms of preparing for you for next week's agenda. Okay, so before I'm forgetting, before we get forgetting about the class agenda, let me move back to the schedule first. Okay, let me go back to the schedule of our class. Since we're already on week 7, week 6, which talks about the preparation for oral presentation. Okay, so we already done this part, right? So if you notice at this point, if you are looking at the feedback folder of your paper, you can see that I'm still working on it. Okay, and then I guess there are 6 of you who already done with my review. Let me see. Okay, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people who are already done with the review. So there are still 15 or so people. Oh, 6. There are 23 paper or 23 introduction papers submitted to the folder on Friday. So there are still 16 people to revise in a couple of days. So I'm going to manage that in Monday. Okay, Monday. What is that? So by Monday, October the 4th, okay, we're going to have a presenters workshop. Okay, we're going to have presenter workshop and also discussion about the evaluation of the introduction. Okay, so here, since in Tuesday, I am asking you to look up for the materials given in EduNext about what to include in our presentation and what style and language that we need to use in the presentation. And today is the day where we are going to look up for the deliverability of the presentation. And so the evaluation of your introduction paper will be done on Monday next week, right? With the same time for you to have some kind of a discussion on your progress, or you can show me how is your presentation slide draft. Okay, so at least for Monday, I need you to prepare some kind of a rough draft of your slide presentation. Okay, before we are starting our 3-minute presentation on next week's Thursday, which is on the October the 7th. Okay, which is on the October the 7th. We're going to start our 3 minutes presentation, which is basically the second major assignment of this class. Okay, so here in Monday, we're going to discuss about the revision or the evaluation of your introduction paper. And then we're also going to have a presenters workshop. Presenters workshop. Okay, which we are going to discuss about the draft that you create for the 3 minutes presentation. Okay, so since today we're going, okay, so now we're going to talk about the delivery of a certain presentation. That can be viewed from 3 stylistic perspective. The thing that is what means here is that a presentation is basically a accumulation or a union of a speech made by someone, and then it is also a presentation of figures, charts, maps, etc., and also the ability of a certain people to deliver the message so that the audience will understand the message or the topic that one presenter is going to talk about. And so preparing a scientific presentation, it not only about the message, but it also we need also to think about how we organize our talk, and then what type of visuals that need to be presented, and also the way that we deliver the presentation itself. And so giving a good talk, it is important. More people will see your talk than will read your papers. Okay, these are basically the advantages of a oral presentation, because more people tend to see a talk rather than reading a certain manuscript, especially if it's if the manuscript itself is a scientific paper. Okay, because it needs some time, it needs a perfect arrangement or a perfect environment to working or to read the scientific paper in a proper way. Okay, or in a proper so it's just need to have perfect location and also perfect time to, because for example, myself, if I have too many tasks to do for a certain period of time, I certainly will not look on your paper. Okay, so if I'm busy with teaching, with examining your final presentation draft for the final project, and then if I'm busy with the responsibility as a coordinator or as a head of laboratory or as a member of the research division, etc., and so on, then the paper reading session will be the last priority. Okay, And so even in that normal situation, if people attending a certain seminar or a certain annual meeting, they tend to prefer on watching a certain presentation rather than reading the proceeding or reading the paper or reading the standard abstract. Even though if it's short, even though the paper itself is not longer than 5 pages, they still prefer to see presentation. So that's why even in our study program, your final project draft, okay, even though it is written beautifully, even though it is written in the proper way, in a scientific proper way, and then even though it is written without any typos, etc., and so on, the last thing that we need to show, that we need to look upon, is your presentation. It's the way that you present the data with your voice, with your gesture. Okay, so that's why we can evaluate your comprehension about the thing that you work for your final project. And before we moving on to the final project, we are practicing now in the scientific communication class. And therefore, whatever topic that you choose for your paper and presentation, even though you write the presentation, even though you write the topic of your interest in a beautiful way, still we as the viewers or as a common listener will tell or will evaluate your comprehension from your presentation, because a written paper can be, can be similar with the source. As I found out from the reviewing your introduction paper, I found one or two people who is basically copy and paste a certain paragraph from the original source. Okay, so in that sense, sometimes the form or the appearance of your paper could be beautiful, could be good, could be well developed, etc., and so on. But if you are not able to communicate orally the thing that you write on your paper in the presentation, then we could not evaluate, or we could not know what is your comprehension, what is your understanding about that topic in full. Okay, so therefore, many people will tend to attend a certain talk instead of reading material, because by listening to them, they will have that opportunity to know about the information that is given from the speakers. Okay, so the audience will form their impression of you based on your talk, and early in your career, treat every talk like an interview talk. Treat any talk in your, or any presentation that you will have in your earlier career as important as your interview talk. The thing that you consider is the most important thing on your career, and then start early as you can. Okay, so here are some things that many listeners want from a talk. First is the content, obviously. Okay, and then they want clarity on organization from the speaker, because two speaker may talks about, for example, about photoelectric effect, but the one that will give better organization or better segmentation or better important things, it will be remembered clearly by the viewers. Okay, And then style and delivery. If the style on delivery from a certain talk is too stiff, just like when a teacher gave a lecture, then the output of the talk itself will not be as 100% as if you delivered as freely as talk that are given in, for example, in the TED meeting, for example. And then the fourth things that viewers or listener will see from each presenter is about their expertise on how they understand the problem, on how they will how the speakers understand or knew how to solve a certain problem. They will see whether the speaker itself is credible, inspires, or able to answer question clearly. Okay, so even though the content is important, but it's not the only thing that you need to consider to have a good talk, because you need also to practice and be able to give clarity in terms of the presentation organization. And then you need to know what style and type of delivery that you need to give in a certain talk. And so that by mastering the content, clarity, and style, then you are basically taking steps to become an expert on your field, basically. Okay. Please remember that whenever you give a talk a certain audience, it will not be the same as the audience, for example, in the academia. So for example, if you're giving a certain talk with the same tone and the same gesture when you're having final project defense, for example, then it will not be interesting. Okay, it will not be as eye-catching as other people who gave more elaborate style or more simple or probably free in terms of their way of presenting. And so therefore so that's why in EduNext I also show you the example of TED talks, etc., and so on, because there are other perspectives on how we are going to deliver a certain presentation. It's not always done in a traditional and formal way, such as in defense, but there are also relaxed way that you can choose in order to send across the message that you want to deliver, that you want to say, or that you want to explain. Okay, and here the best structure of a good talk: you can start broad, get specific, and then end broad. So start with the biggest question and then get progressively more specific. So this one method to do it. So in the beginning, you create an outline where let the audience know about what they're going to hear. Okay, I know that there are people who are hating the outline. There are people who would not recommend you to make an outline in a presentation. There are people, and I've shown you one or two videos in EduNext show that is not using any outline for their presentation because they thought that because they make an analogy of watching a movie. In the movie, they're not going to show you the synopsis or the spoiler of that movie, obviously, right? So basically they're going to make you not anxious, but not word. Sorry. There's a word with curious. Want to make the listener's curiosity bigger as time progresses. Okay, so they want to make some kind of a punchline in the end, so that whenever you introduce a certain problem in the beginning, in the end, the question is answered or not. Okay, so so that's why there are people who doesn't like to put an outline in their presentation, because they want to make that element of surprise on answering the problem that is given in the first part of the presentation. They want to keep the curiosity alive whenever the presentation is ended. Okay? However, for a formal presentation, or for a presentation given in a seminar or annual talk, and it is setting in a formal way, you need to have that outline. Okay, you need to have that outline so that it will guide people to the content of your talk itself. Okay, so so again, the inclusion or exclusion of your outline is depending on the setting of your talk itself. In this class, okay, in this class, there will be settings that you need to obey. I can set the 3 minutes presentation as you are giving a talk in front of a high school students, for example. And then in the final 15 minutes presentation, it's just like when you're having your defense, for example. Then the inclusion or the exclusion of your outline could be considered based on that settings. Okay, if it's a short talk, probably you don't need to have an outline at all. But if it's a long and a lecture, for example, then giving your outline will be necessary, so that the people will know at what stage that the talk is currently at. Okay, so but here in this slide, giving an outline is one of the method that you can have, that you can choose to do, to inform people about the things that you want to convey on that specific time. Okay, and then well, it's basically telling the people that you are making the presentation in an organized way. Okay, even though I'm not saying that the talks in TED talk, for example, is not organized. It is highly organized, but they manage in such a way, in an elaborate way, that the talk in the TED meeting becomes fluid, becomes fun, not formal, but and on the other hand, the message that they want to convey in that meeting is conveyed by the listeners. Okay, even though the setting itself is not formal, etc., and so on, it is not a lecture, but is some kind of people are given some times to deliver their thought and to deliver the result of their studying, for example, in a certain 15 minutes and so, and they use it in not so formal way, but it becomes engaging and easy to understand in the perspective of the listeners. And then the beginning is basically the point, or is the section where you pose the problem that you want to tackle, or this is basically the part where you introduce something, or to introduce people, or to introduce listener to the problem that we're having. So you're giving them context about the background story, etc., and then questions to be answered. What problem that we need to answer? What problem that we need to tackle from this talk, etc., and so on. And then the relevant knowledge on the easy. For example, you can give an example of recent study that is made using the method that you choose, or the relevant topic that is happening on a certain that are happening in the recent times. You can also give that as an example. Okay, so the structure again, you can be broad at the beginning and then get specific and then end broadly. The middle is the meat of the talk. So this is where you talk about the equation, the method, the equipments that you use, etc. So on. Okay, so the middle is basically the meat of the talk, where you put all the specificity or the special things on that you already work previously in the talk. If in introduction you basically gave, or your intention is to grasp that attention from the listener to hear what you're going to say, then the middle part is basically the explanation or the description of the thing that you want to convey. Okay, and then the end is basically, I'm just going to show to the end. The end is basically to tell the audience that the question that you pose in the beginning is solved or not, or the problem is tackled using this method or not, etc. And so on. Okay, that is the end part of the presentation. Oh yeah, the limitation of giving talk, however, is the attention or the audience attention of a certain talk will be decreasing by time progress. Their attention will pick up again whenever we reach the point where you're going to conclude your talk. When you finish your talk, it will be increased again. So whenever so here, this is from a certain study that the lecture of scientific communication in the past looked for us from a certain references. So here in this graph, it is shown a percentage of class paying full attention to a certain topic. And the class itself is lasts for 40 minutes. And then it is shown that the attention of students the attention of the audience will only maximum only at the first part of the lecture. Okay, so hence that's one reason why I don't give too many lectures on scientific communication class, because most lecture becomes too narrative, if I may say. It becomes too narrative and too many words that given on that presentation, okay, given on that lecture. So that's why I always encourage you to look for a certain video, etc. and so on, because some presenters, indeed, they have some kind of a way or technique that make the audience engage with them, even the lecture is going to held in, for example, an hour or even an hour lecture, etc. and so on. They manage to grasp the attention full. So you as a novice presenter, that you're going obviously in this class you're going to present 3 times in 3 minutes, 10 minutes, and 15 minutes presentation. You need to be aware that the attention of each listener or the audience will have more or less the same attitude or the same behavior, even though you only have 3 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes talk. Okay, so make sure that you can get their attention, can get their interest on you on the very start of your presentation, and then conclude them in a sophisticated way, so that you able to answer the imposed problem that is mentioned in this in the beginning. Okay. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of this slide because I believe that you could find materials that are better in this, or that are more interesting than the slide. So the major thing, okay, that you could prepare for your slide, especially for the middle part, is that please put table more than text, okay, and then one slide for each. So you must consider the timing of your slide, for example, because the brute rule, okay, the common rule that a certain presentation have is that you only have a minute to talk about a certain you have a depending on the period of your depending on the duration of your talk. So for example, if you have 10 minutes presentation, and then you're preparing 10 slides, it means that you have 1 minute per slide, okay, and you need and so the amount of slides that you need to prepare for each talk have to be different, okay. You could not prepare for 3 minutes talk using 10 slides, for example, because it's too much, okay. And then if you are if you are preparing for your defense and then talking for 10 minutes, for talking for 20 or 15 minutes, for example, preparing for 40 slides, it will be wasting of time, okay. So you need to be precise on your preparation, so that maximum you're presenting one slide in 1 minute, okay, for that period of time. So for example, if you're going to give a lecture in front of a high school student, for example, and you have 40 minutes, minimum you could have, well, maximum you could have 40 slides for the lecture. If it's less, then it will be okay, but you need to make sure that each slide contain more information to be conveyed for that 40 minutes of lecture. Okay, so that's one example. Okay, physics is an exact science whose pleasure derived from a qualitative understanding. It will turn out as we go more and more advanced physics that many simple things can be deduced mathematically more rapidly than they can be understood in its fundamental or simple answer. So sometimes it is easier for us, especially if we have an audience that which background is not coming from academia. For example, if they are common people or people who have minimum amount of understanding on a certain scientific matter. So be qualitative becomes one of the suggestions that you can have, okay? Because if you are too quantitative, you are strict to the equation and data, probably the nuance or also the talk itself become not interesting. Okay, if you are too quantitative or too strict with the equation, so practice yourself to be more qualitative, which gave you the opportunity to explain a certain phenomena using analogy or using example that people will see in their daily life, for example. Okay, and by that you may also use a simple picture or graph that shows the relation that you have from the study that you conduct. Okay, so therefore keeping your formula or equation simple, and then give tables only when it's necessary. Okay, so because presentation is a visual type of communication, then showing graph instead of table will be encouraged. Okay, show the graph, which is a visual representation of a certain data in a table. Okay, instead of using table, use graph, for example. Okay, and then just because you knew it all doesn't mean everyone else has to. Okay, so so in this illustration where it show about an example of complexity in astrophysics that is told by a certain professor, it becomes complicated because he's explained it in his way. He's not using the audience or the listener's shoes, so that the thing that he convey should be more simpler to understand. Okay, so based on his definition, this is simple, but it's not works for everybody. So make sure that you fit the middle ground. Okay, the middle ground between the minimum knowledge people who attend your talk with the expert that also present on that talk. Okay, so you need, so how do you know that? It is by experience, and then by communicating with the committee, for example, or communicating with your peers that also present on that seminar, for example. You, or by listening to others talk, for example, and then you see the engagement or the interaction that is happening, because sometimes your session is not going to be the first one. Okay, it's not going to be the first presenters of the day, for example. Then you have time to evaluate what type of audience that I have in this meeting. Obviously, for your defense, the main audience will be your advisor, and then will be the two examinee from your research division, and also from outside your research division. But for annual meeting, for example, the people who attend the annual meeting can be coming from academia, can be coming from industry, can coming from the government agency, and also from schools, which has minimum knowledge than people who is attending the universities, obviously. And so make sure that you know what to present and how to make the explanation in the middle ground. Okay, so in the between of the high expert and the high school student, for example, you need to see for the common ground so that your explanation can be understood by both sides. Okay, and it needs a lot of practice and preparation, obviously. Okay. Okay, so one way to explain your data is basically to show the behavior of your data or your findings in a format of charts and graph. So by showing it, you still need to explain what is the behavior on that chart. Obviously, you don't say that, well, this is the figure. Well, this is the figure of today's stock market, or the this is the figure of the of today's stock price, for example, and then you didn't explain anything. So don't be like that. Even though you have charts and data, it doesn't mean that the listener or the audience learn by themselves. Okay, you still need to explain to them what is the meaning of the chart itself. Okay, and then even though it will save time for you as the presenter, but but you also need to be on the listener's shoes, for example, because if you're only showing them graph without explanation, then they will not understand what type of graph it is, what the graph is actually showing, what things that we can learn from that graph, for example. Okay. And then keep Pandora's box closed. It means that you don't show the audience about your lack of ability on certain things. So you don't say that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not the expert of quantum mechanics, for example. No, you may say that you are not an expert in terms of superconductivity, for example. You may say that I am not an expert in terms of string theory, for example. But but you shouldn't mention that during your presentation. When you talk about a certain things, when you talk about your topic, in your main presentation, don't ever tell the audience about your inability on some things. Okay, but you may mention them during the question and answer session, but never on the main presentation time itself. Okay, so never say that I'm not the expert. Well, I'm sorry for my bad presentation because I'm actually still learn about this thing, etc. No, never done that. Okay, don't ever done that, because the listener or the audience have certain expectation of presenters. They expect presenters to be able to deliver the message even though the material itself is kind of hard or not easy to explain, for example. But you don't say to them about your inability, about your disadvantages, etc., and so on, because it will make the audience is not pleased with you, and they will basically will not listen to the talk itself. Okay, so so during the main presentation, never talk about it. I'm just a student. I'm just learning about the magnetic method just couple months ago, etc. So never say that. Okay, never say that. So whenever you have that presentation session, please aware that you need to practice, so that during presentation you will be able to present whatever materials that is prepared on that presentation time, and never say about your inability on something. Okay, and then if the audience in the question and answer session ask you about something that is out of topic or something that is outside your knowledge, then on that period of time you may say about your standing, for example. Oh, okay, sorry, probably in this case, okay, for example, in our talk, we just showing you an example of simple application of this method, etc., and so on, but we haven't talked or we haven't think about the connection between our method with the question that you asked earlier. So, and since I'm still working on it, then probably your suggestion would be beneficial for further study, for example. Okay, so so you're not so in a graceful way, you basically tell us that you're not an expert on that field, okay, but you are willing to learn more or probably to connect in the future the thing that you mentioned in the presentation with the thing that is asked by the audience, without telling the audience that you are not an expert on that field, for example. It's just the way that you to avoid this type of circumstances. Okay. Okay. Next, the structure of a good talk: start broad, get specific, and then add broad. On a certain middle part of your talk, you can be more specific. Okay, it can be highly technical, etc. And so on, especially when you are talking about a certain type of sensor or a certain type of electrodes, a certain type of inversion calculation, etc. and so on. But that is only on the middle part of your talk. And then the end, okay, the conclusion must be given in a way that it will make the interest of your audience picks up again. And then end with the most specific conclusion, and then build back to the big picture, whether you answer the imposed problem that you given in the beginning or not. Okay. So here in the conclusion and recommendation, you basically pinpoints the key points, the implication, and the one slide for each message. Okay. First is the key points. From this study, we found that A, B, C, and D, and then the implication on the other side is the implication of this study. It may increase something, or it may give some kind of an effect on certain things, and then you can make suggestion to improve the study, or tell things that need to be avoided on the study, so that the analysis becomes more clear, for example. Okay, so organizing a great talk, be smart about PowerPoint. I've add a video about death on the PowerPoint because some people abuse the color, okay, the color and the the layout of a certain PowerPoint, and it becomes people tend to bored or uninterested with the slide itself or with the talk itself. So be smart with it. Okay, your introduction should be start broad and then get specific, and then think yourself as consisting of episodes. So your introduction is one episode, your method is one episode, your result is one episode, and then the conclusion and recommendation becomes your epilogue. Use a home slide to make transition effectively. So this is true. Okay, the home slide to make transition effectively is true for a long meeting, but not for a short meeting, because you can make a transition between one section to another abruptly. Okay, or you can basically tell us on the title, on the above of the slide, that you are on a certain section, and then you're already moving on to the next one. Okay, and it is true for a short talk. For example, if you are talking in the defense, for example, 15-minute talks, you're not necessary to make a transition slide from one section to section. And then your conclusion should start with specific but end broadly. Okay, here is examples of PowerPoint poisoning. For example, you make too many details on a certain chart or on a certain flow chart, for example. Try not to use too many slides. Often less can be more effective. Okay. And then another drawbacks that can be have from PowerPoint is that one example is PowerPoint indigestion, and it means that don't put too many things on your slides for your 15-minute slides. It is different for lecture. Okay, for lecture, sometimes the teacher needs to convey many things due to the curriculum or due to the requirement mentioned in the syllabus. So they put many things on slides, on certain slides, and so students may be hard to grasp all of the information that is taken from that one particular slide. But that is true for lecture. for scientific meeting, don't ever done that. Do not do that. In your defense also, okay? So one slide should be mentioning about a certain topic, but not many topics, okay? Because it is more appropriate for a lecture settings, but not for defense or even in scientific meeting settings. Okay? And then the other sickness or the other things that can be disadvantages in PowerPoint presentation is that some people do have myopia. Okay, so they could not different the image that they see from a black background to white font or a white background with a black font sometimes makes them headaches or sometimes makes them their vision unclear. Okay, so make sure that you use the appropriate size of the fonts so that people who is sitting on the back of your meeting room will see all of the explanation given in this. Okay, and then flying object, it means that don't put too many animations when you have that transition of points in your presentation. Okay, don't overdo the bells and whistles. Okay, especially during defense. In your defense, your final project defense, do not use animation with voice. For example, well, I'm not talking about the animation or the I'm not talking about the video or animation of the study itself, but the transitional you know, when you're working on the presentation and then you show the title, the subtitle, and then the explanation. Sometimes you make them appear using a certain animation, okay, with a flying or appearing settings, and it followed by a sound. Okay, don't ever use that for your defense. Okay, don't ever use that for a defense. If you're talking with if you are talking or if you are giving a presentation in front of a high school student or elementary school student or junior high student, you may use that to grab their attention because they tend to be more sensitive on that voices, but not on your defense because it's basically will bother the examinee and the audience during your formal presentation on your formal occasion. And then technical difficulties, okay? The antidotes, it can be managed if you, for example, arrive early, you check the equipment, and then you communicate with the committee about the problem, etc. and so on. You always have a backup plan on your talk so that if your defense is, for example, if your defense or if our scientific communication talk is hindered by technical difficulties. For example, your PPT is need to be updated, you know, or your PPT is saved in a different version. Make sure that your PPT is saved in the latest version. Okay, so that people who use different computers can access, for example. And it is also true for the connection. Okay, it's also true for the connection when we have an online meeting. Make sure that your connection is always in a good form. It is also true also for me as the teacher and the organizer of the scientific communication presentation session later on. And then lost the patient. Okay, reading word for word from your visual is basically a presentation death, especially during scientific meeting. But it is not true for a certain lecture because, for example, in this lecture, in scientific communication or in English language or Bahasa Indonesia, etc. and so on, narrative explanation is to be done instead of quantitative or qualitative explanation. Okay, so for physics presentation, such as in defense and annual meeting, do not reading word by word from your visuals, because it's basically equals to your presentation that are the disappearance of your listeners' attention to your presentation. So make sure that you don't do that during the defense and a scientific meeting. But for lecture, however, there are some there are topics that needs to be done narratively, such as here in scientific communications theory, and also in Bahasa Indonesia lectures, or probably also in English lecture, etc. and so on. It becomes narrative, so that you make sure that your attention on the same level as in the beginning. Okay, and here is basically the antidotes, or how to manage this type of sickness when you have when you deal with the presentation session. Okay. Okay, I can moving on to the next one. An important part of delivery is your interaction with the audience. It means that you need to have a solid voice, and then good gesture, and then especially when you deliver in front of a certain audience, it means that you need to move from one place to another during your presentation to make the attention from the listener onto you. Okay. Okay. Okay, given the presentation, starting out is the hardest part of the talk. Usually you can introduce yourself, and then you mention about the title, and then you may thank to a certain people on the audience. For example, in your defense, you could say that thank you for Mr. Hari Mahardika for attending the talk of my defense as an examinee, for example, and thank you for the and thank you for my advisor, Mr. X, for example, etc. Before you talk about the introduction of your talk. Okay, so here, so prepare a strong wording emphasis, strong points of transition. You may use these words during your presentation. Okay, so that people will know at one part of presentation that they had at the moment. Okay, so remember to relax, smile, and breathe during your presentation, so that you will not get anxiety or stage fright when you're talking about them. And then we probably sometimes people lost when they're talking about something. So make sure that you are in the relaxed condition, not to be pressured, because if you are lost during your presentation, it will be you won't have any second chance to repent, especially during annual meeting where the scheduling becomes tighter and tighter. If you are unable to speak, then you will not have second opportunity to show the presentation for the second time. And that's also true for your defense, because usually defense only done once on a certain time, because the grades of your defense must be done on the same day of your defense. So make sure that your defense is prepared well, so that you won't be blank, or your focus is still 100% on your talk, even in the middle part of your talk. Okay, so there are many suggestions that is mentioned in here. Okay, These are a example of how you manage your time. So if you have 3 minutes of presentation, for example, next week, it means that you need to know what is the timing of your self-introduction, and also how many times that you need to introduce the audience to the topic of your choice itself. And even so, for the 15 minutes presentation and also 10 minutes presentation, you need also to manage the timing of your introduction, main body, and also the conclusion. Okay, so rehearsing, okay, is the key of your success. So do not over rehearse or memorize the talk, okay, but you need to practice. Okay, you need to practice in such a way that you able, okay, even though memorizing your presentation is not encouraged in this slide, but the degree of comprehension that you need to make is that you need to have the ability to explain the topic even though you don't have the slide. Okay, if you knew all about the topic without memorizing it, obviously, but at least you knew what is the main topic and what is the main explanation that you have from one slide to another without having any visual, for example. For example, in your defense, make sure that your slides is organized properly so that you knew what type of information that you need to convey from slide 1 to the last, even though you're not memorizing it, but you know what is the main message of its slides. So for example, in the introduction part, you know what to mention about, for example, Maxwell's equation, and then you know about the Ohm's law, etc., and so on, without the need to showing the audience what is the Maxwell law is or the Ohm's law is. That's another one example. Okay, what can go wrong from preparing or working on a presentation? Anything can be wrong. So anticipating any things that need to be that is related to your presentation is key. Okay. You can have that moment that you are basically blank. Okay, you have uncertainty about the material, and then probably people will interrupt you. Okay, and then you are running out of slide, or maybe you are running out of time. So make sure that if you practice, if you have some kind of or if you have time to, or if you are organizing well your presentation, running off slides or running out of time should be a problem. Okay, shouldn't be a problem. Okay, here are the explanation about the uncertainty of the material, and then interruptions during presentation, and then how to deal with problem of running off a slide, and how to deal on running out of time. Okay. Handling question is an essential part of a given talk, especially when we have that question and answer session. The most important thing is that never argue with the questioner. You may say that his idea is interesting, or you may say that his opinion is logical, but you can say that on this research, for example, it's not conveying your opinion at the moment, for etc. and so on. So there are techniques to basically avoid arguing with the people who question your talk. Okay, so question and answer probably will be more beneficial if we already on the 15 minutes slide. Probably I will convey this or I will talk about this later on. Whenever when we're having that 15-minute session. Okay, but you can still learn this in order for you to know about the context of giving presentation, especially when you are preparing for your own defense. Okay, how to tackle difficult questions, how to tackle stage fright, anxiety, and so on, and things that you need to check before you give a talk. For example, the projector, microphone, the network, etc., and so on. Yeah, to conclude, good preparation and delivery makes the talk flow. Know what your surroundings will be like, the size of your room, the microphone condition, the equipment, know your audience, and then get to the point early and often. Organize your slides so that they effectively deliver your central message, and then practice your presentation out loud with coworkers. Respect your time limit, and then answer questions skillfully. Okay, so the answer of your as long as it is not a final project defense, your answers needs to be doesn't need to answer the question on point, okay, because you can basically tell us that the question itself is not relevant to the study itself, but you may need to answer it skillfully. Okay, you need to have a certain speech on to avoid a certain opinion, etc., and so on, but not on your defense, because in defense the examinee will seek a certain answer from you. So okay, so be aware that in your defense you need to answer the question given by the examinee clearly, but in annual meeting, for example, you may avoid the question by rephrasing their question, or by saying that the study that you currently done is not necessarily directed, or is not necessarily in connection with the questions, for example. Okay, this for delivery. Presentation style is important, and then expect the unexpected. And so to deal with it, you need to practice, practice, and practice. Okay, I think that's all for today's lecture, because the material itself is somehow narrative, and actually you could learn from other videos or other materials that is more engaging or more interesting to look upon. But nevertheless, we are already talk about the method on delivery I talk, and so next week we're going to start our 3 minutes presentation that talks about the introduction of your specific topic. So make sure that you use the 3 minutes wisely, and you basically able to keep the time in check. Okay, so I will evaluate the timing and also your ability to explain the topic itself, and also I'm going to check whether you obeying the time limitation or not. Okay, so make sure you practice before the 3 minutes presentation next week, and then I will send you the evaluation, and hopefully I will done with the evaluation of your introduction paper by Monday, so that in Tuesday, so that at that day we could talk or discuss more about your 3 minutes presentation preparation. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here, and then if there are any question from the students about our activities next week.
Sir.
Yes, please.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
It's about the problem from the introduction paper. You said that some students work, the sentences is copying from the certain resource.
Yes.
I want to ask you that what if we make the sentences from the source. I mean, the sentence is a citation, is a part of the citation from the source, original source. So
Well,
the sentences, it's not edited or rearranged. It's the original form from the citation or from the source. Is it okay,
well,
or
no,
we
no,
have
no,
to
no.
rearrange the sentence?
You have to rearrange. You have to paraphrase. Well, actually, you need to paraphrase the original sentence from the original source, so that in your paper or in your manuscript, it doesn't contain similarity with the original one, because it is part of plagiarism actually. So here, even though in our class we are practicing, okay, even though in our class we are practicing, but we practice in the correct way. Okay, we want to practice in the correct way. So you don't copy and paste the original sentence into ours, okay, into ours, because what I'm asking you to do in the introduction is you basically make a literature review, not copy and pasting the original source. So by means of literature review is that at least you have 5 papers that talks about that certain topic that you interested on. So for example, when you are going to talk about, for example, radiation therapy, okay, radiation therapy, at least you need to have 5 references that is basically adding or confirming a certain sentence on your introduction. For example, in the first part of your introduction, you will say that radiation therapy nowadays is a common treatment in cancer, for example. You need to have that reference of radiation therapy from cancer, but without copy and pasting, or without using the same sentence as the original one, because you could make it by yourself, because you could make your argument by yourself, and then it is upheld by the reference. Okay, it's basically your statement is basically made by a certain study, made by a certain research done by someone. Okay, so answering your question, whether it is possible for you to to use the same sentence as in the original text, no, never done that, because it's basically copy and paste, right? It's basically copy and paste. If you use the same word, use the same arrangement on the original paper into our paper introduction, is basically copy and paste. Okay, even though we are typing it, we're not select the sentence and then we copy and paste, but we basically type it, but the words is the same as in the original paper, then it's basically copy and paste. Okay, so what you need to do is to paraphrase it, or you change it into a certain way. For example, when you're talking about the application of magnetotelluric method, for example, you will say that the application of magnetotelluric method is applied in applied in hydrology problem and geothermal problem, and so you make a citation of the paper that you have, for example, but never type the same sentence from the original paper, never. Okay.
Okay, sir. Can I say something?
Yes.
About that? So I found some papers that the introduction part is I found that some sentence in the two of my sources is the same, exactly the same sentences. Is it possible, or there is indicating that one
Is
of the
the author
paper
is the
is
same?
copying
Is
with
the author
another?
is the same or not? Is the
No,
author is the same?
different. But the citation number or the citation resource is exactly the same from another paper.
Well, I have to look at. I have to look by myself
Okay.
to evaluate whether the originals, whether the reference that you use is kind of problematic or not. But generally, you know, if two authors, two different authors talking about the same thing, usually the content of their introduction will be different. It shouldn't be similar. It cannot be similar whatsoever. Because people will check. Okay, every publisher in scientific publication, they will check the similarity between one publication to another. So if they found that a certain manuscript have that similarity with some degrees, that they will reject that draft basically. So I'm not sure about the sources or the references that you mentioned here, because I haven't there are some examples for in my experience is that for people who produce papers, many papers, sometimes, and then they talk about the continuation of his study, for example, they will use the same references and the same, the same arrangement on their introduction, but never the same, but never using the same structure or even the same sentences when they mention about the topic in the introduction. So I don't know. Well, is it possible for you to
Or maybe
share screen?
I can
Yeah,
send you the file in Teams, because currently I am displayed the Zoom in my mobile phone, sir.
Oh, okay. So you can send me later on about the paper that you mentioned here, because it shouldn't be as similar as if it's written by two different persons, it shouldn't be similar, unless they have a same advisor, for example. Then there will then the chance of have the same introduction in terms of the wording, etc., probably higher. But okay, please send them to me so that I can evaluate. Okay. Okay, any other question from the students before I'm closing the class today? Okay, no other question, then I could stop the recording. Okay, stop the recording.